Right, I'm now recording this. Sharon,
Okay.
you should be able to, yep, you're on unmute, far away.
Right, fine. Do I need to do anything with you? Do I need to mute you?
Well, no, I'll probably mute myself. I'll be monitoring the chat box. So if anybody's got any comments or questions, fire them in the chat box. We'll be giving plenty of time at the end of the presentation for specific questions for you, so we can go back through the chat, or we can unmute and you can ask Sharon your questions. I will just hand the controls over to you, Sharon. Give me 2 secs.
All right, anything can happen now.
Yeah, make you a host. Yeah, so Sharon, as I do this, it's going to mute me. So if you want me on mute, leave me on mute. If you don't, unmute me. Okay.
Okay. Right, it doesn't say that you're on mute.
Okay, good. So perhaps you could start with an introduction about yourself.
Yeah, that's fine. So how can I scroll through this? Now I should just be able to click down, should I?
You should, what, on the screen share?
Yeah.
There should be a bar there that allows you to share your screen.
All right. Have you? Sorry. So you haven't got my presentation on here.
I have your presentation.
Can you put it on? I haven't got it on this computer. That's fine. Sorry, I thought it was in lot together. My apologies, Dave.
All right, no worries. Let me share my screen here. So you just tell me when to press the buttons.
All right, I'll let you press the buttons. Right,
okay.
Cool.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, cool. All right, That's great. Thank you ever so much. Sorry for that confusion. So let me introduce myself. My name is Sharon Bridgland-Gough. I'm what's described as a portfolio people director. What that basically means is that I work with a number of clients. I have a portfolio of clients, and I support them with their people issues. That could be looking at their people strategy overall. It could be something simple as helping with employee contracts or a particularly challenging employee issue. In my other life, I'm a non-exec director of British Cycling. I am not a going out there, clad in lycra all the time cyclist. I'm what we call as a recreational cyclist. So I go out with my family. I actually ride a bright pink tandem with my husband, and we raise money for charity that way around. But really in my outside life, I'm absolutely into my cycling, and I enjoy that. I've been in HR for, I hate saying this, actually now 32 years. I worked with really small organisations of 10, 15 people to organisations of 16,000 people. I was, in my last corporate job, the Chief People Officer for Nuffield Health, so in terms of hospitals and gym provision as well. So that's a little bit about me. And in terms of this afternoon, I don't know if I flick through to the next one, Dave. So in terms of this afternoon, I thought we'd really kind of focus on sort of 3 different areas of this session. So first of all, I think it's probably useful to share with you some of the steps that the government has been talking about and that was actually announced on Monday, last night. And I worked with a number of clients over this week who said to me, can you just help us make some sense of this easing of the lockdown? So we're going to do a little bit of that first of all. I'm then going to talk about what a COVID-19 secure workplace it means. And you might have heard something about this in the last couple of days. It's quite tricky, and it's important that when we are in a position that we are reopening leisure facilities, etc., that there's a bit of understanding about what that actually means. You'll also be aware that Rishi Sunak on Tuesday of this week announced some changes and the extension of the furlough scheme. So we'll talk about that, what happens next. And then opportunity to ask questions at the end of that. And within that, ask your questions. I'm going to pose you guys a range of questions, which are just much more things to be thinking about right now. So, David, we can kind of flick on to the next one, please. So, most of you should be familiar with this wonderful graph that we had over Sunday and into Monday. And effectively, you know, over the coming months, the government will be introducing a range of adjustments to the current social distancing measures. And these are all going to be very, very carefully timed according to both the spread of the virus and the government's ability to ensure safety. And that's really been the key message. So, for example, they've identified really sort of 3 steps and what they think will happen and when they think will happen. But as you know, a lot of it is going to be dependent on R. Now, obviously, we can't call it R rate, but it's going to be dependent upon R. So what they've effectively said, and as from yesterday, we can do more things. We can go out for exercise now more than once per day, and outdoor public places are open. So as we know, yesterday, outdoor tennis courts were open, golf courses were opened, and also the fact that you can now see somebody from outside your household, one person, as long as you are in an outdoor space, as long as you are maintaining social distancing. But what the government is saying is actually, you know, their roadmap, because of the risk of transmission outdoor, is significantly lower. That's the reason why they focus on reopening outdoor spaces first of all. And that, you know, reopening indoor public spaces like leisure facilities and premises where there's a core purpose of social interaction, or venues that are going to attract large crowds, is only going to be possible at a later date and dependent on a reduction of the number of infections. So that's the whole purpose here. If the infections continue to go down, we can continue to open things. But what needs to be borne in mind is that there is an absolute clear message that has started to come out that social distancing is going to be around for a long period of time. I don't know whether anybody heard the Chief Medical Officer and the Chief Scientific Advisor on, I think it was Tuesday of this week, it could be Monday or Tuesday, saying the potential of finding a vaccine will be a lot longer, and that will probably be in addition. Actually, if anybody is infected, it's going to be down to using therapeutics, and thus we need to maintain social distancing as much as possible. As we say very much, the government is going to be monitoring and engaging and looking at what is actually happening before they move from one step to the next step. So what sectors can return right now can work? That's construction, manufacturing, food production, logistics, garden centres, which I think is an interesting one. Bicycle shops, veterinary surgeries, taxis, private hire, and some of those medical things like emergency dental, etc. The later phases, obviously, from the 1st of June, non-essential retail will be able to open in phases. And as we know, the school years, year R, year 1 and year 6 can go back into primary school, and at one point in time they are wanting to try and get the whole of primary school years back in for at least a month's worth of learning before the holidays. What the message is, we all know that secondary schools will not be going back until September. I did tell my daughter that, and she was really happy because I think she's fed up of homeschooling. And then, provided everything moves in the right way, Thursday, the 4th of July, they're looking at hairdressers, beauty salons, hospitality, places of worship, and leisure facilities. So if we think about it, if the 4th of July is not that far off, and one of the things that we are saying to all of our clients right now is start to prepare for that, start to think about it, because what we have heard, and no guarantee of it, that it's likely that moving from one phase to the next phase, there's probably going to be about a 48-hour notice period, because it's all dependent on that R infection rate.
Sharon, so
yeah.
I'll just jump in there one sec. There's some issues with your audio. It's I think it's probably just your Wi-Fi connection. Maybe if you knock out your video, that will help your bandwidth.
My video, okay, I'll knock out my video. There we go. Is that any better?
Yeah, it's kind of chopping in and chopping out. So we'll see if it's any better from here.
Do I put my headphones on? Would that be better?
Yeah, we can.
Right,
try
hold
that.
on. It's probably, I imagine somebody's probably watching something downstairs. Hold on.
Just bear with, guys. We'll see if we can improve this audio quality. I'm not sure if she's gone downstairs to have a stern word or gone to grab the headphones. I hope the latter.
Sorry, I've gone to get my headphones because they're not with me.
The actual sound of the audio, the actual sound of the audio is okay. It was just a bit choppy with the bandwidth. So okay, carry on.
Yeah. Okay. All right. We'll try that. We'll try that. Okay. All right. So what did we miss there? Did we get most of that?
Oh yeah, we got pretty much all of it. It was just a bit choppy.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, I will tell the child off when I come out of here. I imagine she's using all the bandwidth on some funny game. So in terms of that, it is really clear that the government is giving us signals that provided the infection rate is going down, it will start to slowly reopen the economy. And the advice that we're giving to all our clients right now is prepare for that. So if your business is in the latter part, start to prepare and start to think about what you may need to be doing now. So if we could just flip to the next slide, that would be fabulous, please. So one of the things that was released late on Monday evening is guidance to all workplaces. And a workplace can obviously be a place where also you have got your customers coming into, on what they call COVID-19 secure workplace. It's a hugely sexy title is the way I would describe it. And the government basically are giving guidance to everybody about the measures that are required to be put in place. And they set out in these guidelines what needs to happen in each different type of physical safe so that that site can be adapted properly to operate effectively. There are currently 8 guidance documents, and they range from guidance for offices, it ranges for guidance to construction, plant, manufacturing, labs, research, restaurants, working in other people's homes, vehicles, and shops. The guidance that we don't have right now is guidance in terms of within leisure facilities. And that would include things like gymnastics club, gyms and sports centres, etc., etc. But what we can actually anticipate is that what we are seeing in the early guidance for the other 8 areas, a lot of that will carry on through. So I think it's kind of relevant to our conversation this afternoon. One of the things that all employers will be expected to do is to provide what we call a COVID-19 secure certificate. And that certificate is, you'll see on the screen here, is that one that says staying COVID-19 secure in 2020. And there are 5 steps that the government will be expecting all employers to have done to demonstrate that they are effectively COVID secure. And you'll see there that you will have to carry out a COVID-19 risk assessment. And to be really honest, it is no different to any other normal risk assessment that you are required to carry out, but it does have some specifics within that. And all employers will need to complete the risk assessment. And this actually needs to be in writing as well if you have 5 or more employees. And the government recommends that risk assessment output is displayed on the website of businesses if they've got more than 50 employees. It's unlikely to affect most of you on this webinar today. There is also then a large focus, as you see, on hygiene and hygiene procedures. So in terms of use of washrooms and toilets, additional hand washing facilities, sanitizers, sanitizer stations, and deep and frequent cleaning in high touch areas as well. And I've just literally been on the phone with a client who has got shared washroom facilities, and that is a little bit complicated. And how do you approach that to ensure that actually you can satisfy that as the employer when you don't have full control over it? So there's a lot of thinking that does actually need to go into that as well. There is then obviously, this issue about taking all reasonable steps to help people work from home. Now that's a really interesting one. It'd be interesting to see how they plan on carrying that out from a leisure facility point of view. And that's the reason why they potentially haven't issued the guidance as yet. But just so really for an awareness perspective, what the government is trying to do is encourage where people can work from home, they should be working from home.
But actually, if they can't do their job from home, so for example, a lorry driver can't do their job home, somebody who is fulfilling an order request and the product is sitting in an office can't do their job from home, the government is saying absolutely you should go into work and you should work with your employer to make sure that you feel safe and secure. So one of the things that the employer would need to do is really understand each individual's circumstances. So for example, if somebody is in a household where there is somebody who is in the vulnerable category, asking them to come back into work, is that a reasonable request? Because there is the potential that that individual may mix and they may transmit the virus back to that vulnerable person at home. So understanding in quite some detail your employees and their circumstances becomes more hugely important. And again, as an example, I've been working with a client this afternoon who has 70 employees, and I know it's obviously a different scale, but going line by line through each employee and understanding their circumstances. And then finally, you know, within the workplace, all reasonable steps to maintain the 2-meter distance will have to take place. And that will absolutely continue as we move forward. But where that 2-meter distance cannot be done, you then have to look at what else you can do to manage that transmission risk. So what the government are really clearly saying is you've got to take all reasonable steps to maintain that, but where you cannot, what are the other steps that you could do to avoid transmission risk? And that's where the new guidance on the face coverings actually comes in now. And they're also recommending that if you are in an indoor scenario, like within a shop, you should be using a face covering. It is not mandatory, it is recommended, and that's a bit of clarity that we've managed to achieve. So that's, you know, the shape around ensuring a COVID secure workplace. You know, I don't anticipate that too much of that is going to change as we move forward and the other guidance coming through. It will just be interesting to see what they are going to recommend in enclosed leisure facilities.
Sharon, just quickly, got a question here from Julian.
Mm-hmm.
How do we apply for the certificate? Is this self-certification, and is there a physical certificate, or is there a link that they've got to go to? It's
a great question. So it is a self-certification. And this is the really interesting part of it, and I know Dave, you and I were just talking about this, is you are required to demonstrate and display that if your facilities are open, believe it or not, and I was quite astounded when a risk and compliance manager just told me about this, a police officer, it could see your premises open, could walk in and ask to show the certificate. So you know, and if the HSE would walk in and they could ask to see the certificate. So you do need to have done your own risk assessment and display that certificate and ensure that you are maintaining those 5 steps to safer working together, in case at any one point in time that you have somebody within a compliance capacity walking and asked to see it.
Okay, so is there a place where you can go and download that certificate?
Yes, you can download it from the government website, and if you just put in staying COVID-19 secure in 2020, that certificate should actually pop up for you. It's on a PDF format. Dave, if there's any help, we could always try and send it out to everybody after this call, or actually what we could do is pop it up on your Facebook site so that people can have a look at that.
Okay, good. Would
that be helpful? Yeah, we'll do that.
Thanks.
Okay, so so when the guidance is issued for leisure facilities, and you can actually go online right now and look at the other 8 guidances, you'll see that actually the actual guidance covers really 8 areas. So it asks you to be thinking about your risk, who should go to work, so determining who are the right people to go to work, how do you maintain social distancing, how do you manage your customers and your visitors. It talks about deep cleaning within the workplace, and then the use of PPE and face coverings, and then finally, you know, managing your workforce and in and outbound goods. all the guidance currently to date takes this same format, and I'm not expecting it to be any different. But quite helpfully, and I'm trying not to be sarcastic, but actually this is really, really good guidance. And I've been really suitably impressed that there's a lot of clarity in this guidance about what you should be thinking about and what you should be doing. And what we do know is that, you know, the businesses and unions have actually really got together to help and work alongside of these, alongside the government in terms of writing these. So let's just give an example, because you may have some offices. In an office environment, you know, what they are recommending is that those who come into the office, you know, first of all, employers should begin by ensuring that the staff who would ordinarily travel by public transport can actually come into work in a different way. They've got somewhere to park their cars, they've got bike facilities, and potentially they might have some changing facilities. They're also suggesting about staggering arrival and departure times, and also thinking about having one-way systems so that you create a minimum contact as possible with other people. And as you may have seen on the television and all sorts of things, that this whole kind of floor marking is really coming to a fore. So they're encouraging employers who do have offices to use floor tape to mark out areas to help workers keep 2 meters apart, but also to mark out workstations. And there's quite a lot of guidance in the office guidance about how you should be laying out your workstations if you have got an office, and how to keep that 2 meters apart as well. So, you know, if you do have the opportunity to actually just go in and have a look at these couple of guides, I would really, really encourage you to do that. And then finally, as we all know, the government is trying to encourage people not to use public transport. And that can be quite challenging. So where you particularly have people who live and work in metropolitan areas, most people often do that because they don't necessarily have access to their own car, their own vehicle, and their choice of transport has normally been public transport. So one of the things that we're encouraging employers to really think about is how they can work with people whose only option is the public transport, and thinking about, you know, avoiding going on the transport during busy times. Is there an alternative way in which they can travel? Can they walk? Do they have access to a bike? And really encouraging employers to help and support people around that side of things as well. Dave, so we move to the next slide. Do I need to unmute you? Did you mute yourself?
Okay, sorry, I'm unmuted now. Just a question from Jen. She asks, is this for England only at the moment or across the UK?
No, this is for England only at the moment. As we know, our colleagues are whoever we want to call them, our relations in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, they have not moved down this step as yet. And they will not move down that step until they believe their infection rates are also declining as well. As you remember, Scotland do have, all the devolved nations do have their own powers over this. What we can anticipate, though, is that they will take some elements of this, but it's just purely in England right now. We are obviously in a watching brief with all of the other devolved nations as well at this stage.
Okay, good. Next slide.
Okay, so, and this obviously does impact all the devolved nations, is the furlough scheme. Now, I think in terms of furlough, it wasn't really something that was in our language back in March of this year, although I do know that Kim in the US, it's common language in the US to furlough somebody. So just to recap, the furlough scheme has been extended to the end of October, and staff from the beginning of August will be able to return to work part-time. And one of the challenges with the furlough scheme has been that it's an all-or-nothing scheme right now. So you might have an employer that has actually got work for somebody for about 20, 30, 40% of the time, but not for all of the time. What we found is that employers have furloughed those individuals and have given work to other individuals, and those individuals actually have been working more than their normal hours because the government have not allowed people to be part-time furloughed. They are going to change that from August. Obviously, Rishi Sunak's announced the changes earlier on this week because there was quite a lot of concern about removing the support too early. So that retention scheme has been extended. it will continue to be paid up to 80% of an individual's current salary up to the £2,500. That is not going to change, and that will be in place until the end of October. However, and we don't have details of this as yet, the government have said that from August they will be expecting employers to make some form of contribution to the scheme. Now, what does that mean and what does that look like? We just don't know. And what does it mean and what does that look like in terms of being able to do it for part-time return to work? Again, we just don't know. So we are expecting further details of the changes to be published towards the end of May. And what I'll do, Dave, is once we know what those changes are, I can write a little article for your Facebook group just so that it's updated for the guys and they know what's actually happening.
Okay, great, thanks.
The positive thing about this, though, is the fact that, you know, we recognise that some employers' work will ramp up slowly, and so this will give that flexibility to allow that to happen. What I also think is a bit of a clear indication from this is that the government does not expect businesses to be fully up and running and operational anytime soon. They absolutely are signalling the message that this is going to take some time. We've got about another 5 or 6 months left of the furlough scheme. So I think it's interesting, but again, it's a very much watch this space. And the government has also added that it's going to explore the ways through which furlough workers can also do more training and learn more skill. You've actually already been able to, for furloughed individuals, to do training and to learn new skills, but they're thinking about how they expand that a little bit further.
And Sharon, are they extending the support for self-employed workers too?
That's a great question. We haven't heard anything about that as yet. As we know, the support for self-employed workers went live this week, and those people who are eligible to claim would have had some contact from HMRC. What I would anticipate, again, I would not quote me on this, if they've extended the furlough scheme, I would expect them to act comparably with those workers who are self-employed. But again, we have not heard anything on that front as yet.
Okay, good.
Okay, so just moving on to the next slide, because I want to give as much time for Q&A. Plan now, that's my key message today. And, you know, rather cheekily, there is a few questions that you should be thinking about. So, you know, the world will be different as a result of COVID-19. And, you know, we're encouraging people to, whether they're small 2, 3, 4 employees or massive organizations, to think about how is your business most likely impacted, and does that impact your people requirements? How is your turnover going to be impacted? And again, what is the impact on your workforce requirements? We are seeing that some organisations are already saying, right, it's great that the government have extended the furlough scheme, but actually I can't afford to keep people at the end of that. And there is this sense that actually we are just, you know, deferring the inevitable that people may be made redundant because people cannot, you know, organisations' turnover has been severely impacted this year. So I'd encourage you to be thinking about what is the impact of COVID-19 on your business, and what does that mean for your workforce requirements? You know, as I said really at the top, we're likely to be living with this for quite a long period of time. It doesn't end in October when the furlough scheme ends. We've got to think about those types of things. And if there are some roles that you no longer need on a temporary or permanent basis, you know, what are those roles, and will you have to make people redundant, and what's the process you go through, and should you start that process now? So really think about that. And then I think there's this whole thing around preparing for the return to the workplace. So what actions do you need to make your workplace COVID secure? Or are there any different hygiene or PPE practices or procedures that you need to put into place? How are you going to comply with social distancing? Social distancing is absolutely going to continue. And then start to think about actually who is essential to return to the workplace and who should return first. And one of the things is actually, how do you reinduct your workforce? Because, you know, sometimes by the time we get for some organisations to start to go back, you could be looking at September and October. That's quite a long period. So how do you communicate with your teams about the new ways of working and the new rules and the standard? You know, how do you ensure that they know what they've got to do in terms of complying with when customers or individuals visit the sites? And what do you do with employees who don't necessarily conform to those standards that when you do come back to work? So here, I'm just trying to encourage you to be thinking about some of those types of things. How do you establish, for example, the needs and circumstances of each of your employees? Are there going to be issues if you bring employees back who've got childcare responsibilities? So say, for example, when, you know, potential leisure facilities could reopen in July, you know, it's going to be at a time when some holidays will break up towards the end of July. How are people going to be able to cope if they haven't got any childcare facilities? Because we may still have some distancing with vulnerable adults, and we know that a lot of children will go to their grandparents during the holiday season. What will you do with individuals who may be anxious about returning to work and actually perhaps want to stay on furlough or work from home? And as we discussed earlier on, how can you help those who travel by public transport? Do you want to just flick onto the next slide? And there are some further sort of thoughts. So one of the things which is a really interesting thing, and this is this changes literally every night for us. How are you going to manage holiday requests and holiday levels going into the second half of this year and beyond? So how are you going to plan for that? How are you going to manage for that? Just out of interest, the government last night issued guidance which said an employer now can force a furloughed employee to take annual leave as long as the individual can enjoy that annual leave. So previously we couldn't do it. As from last night, we now can force furloughed individuals to take their annual leave, provided they can enjoy the annual leave, which is really, really hard to determine. So, you know, we constantly get this communication coming forward. Have you think about your aspects, about your communication channels? Have you been using communication channels that have worked really well for you throughout the crisis? And how are you going to use that moving forward? And then finally, really thinking about, you know, are there any new skills that you need to have be able to ensure your business is adapting and diversifying? And are there any new roles you need to recruit for in the future? And then finally, I would really encourage you to think about future planning. What would you do the same or differently if we had a second wave and a further lockdown happened, say, for example, in 12 months' time? How would you plan for that? And then really one interesting thing that, you know, popped into my mind last night. Have you looked at your insurances? Do your insurances, are they appropriate now for the new situations? Do they need to change? So, you know, those are just some of the things and some of the questions that we're encouraging businesses and employers to really ask themselves right now. But I've just got a little bit of some advice and guidance for you around, you know, bringing people back into the workplace. When you're thinking about bringing people back into workplace, first of all, is it really essential for them to be coming back into the workplace? You know, can they do their work from home, or actually they have to physically go into the workplace? Is it safe? So make sure the workplace is safe. You know, make sure that you continue with your duty of care to identify and manage risk to ensure the workplace is sufficiently secure for people to return. So social distancing, thinking about those common areas, thinking about gradual return to work. And then finally, and this is really important, is it mutually agreed? And what we mean by that is we know that from research we've done that, you know, 4 in 10 people are quite anxious about returning to work, and a number of them are concerned about being forced back to work. So really making sure that there is absolutely clear dialogue between all your people that you work with, so that they understand and they can raise any issues or concerns and their worries can be taken into account. As with everything, there's always going to be need flexibility on both sides to accommodate different ways of working and doing things in a different thing to way we were doing previously. What we do know that COVID-19 has really changed our world, and we are going to have to live with this for some time. So really thinking and planning these aspects now is hugely important.
So I guess, Sharon, with furloughed workers, it's okay to bring them back into the gyms for training on how the gym is going to operate when the kids come back, right? So going over the processes and procedures around social distancing, cleaning, we can bring the coaches back in to
So you need to think about how you're going to reinduct your workforce and how you're going to communicate those new ways of working. And because obviously it's a very practical thing, bringing them back into the environment to demonstrate it is absolutely okay, as long as they're not doing two things if they're still continuing to be on furlough. The first thing, as long as they're not providing a service, and the second thing, as long as they're not doing revenue generating activities. So they're bringing people in, demonstrating and training them as the ways in which you're going to be doing it is absolutely fine.
Okay, good. A question here: what would you consider to change? What would you consider change in regards to insurance and COVID-19?
So that's a great question. So it's something just popped into my head last night because, from an insurance point of view, I would just check that your insurances continue to be appropriate. I mean, talk with your insurance companies as well. And it was just a thing that popped into my head last night. It came off the back of a conversation I had with a risk and compliance manager as well, who was saying, actually, we're talking to our insurance providers right now to make sure that actually we continue to be covered in the new world.
Okay. All right. Good.
Yeah. So I'm really kind of open to you guys for questions, really.
Okay. So, guys, so we've got one here from Edward. What does it mean providing a service in relation to furlough? About as generic as you can get. Try that one.
But about as generic as you can possibly get. So, It effectively means carrying out your normal duties. And I know, Dave, we talked about this in the past. So if my job is to answer the telephone and take bookings, that is providing a service, okay? But if you, as somebody who is furloughed, if your employer said to you, I'd like you to do some training on our new booking system, as long as you weren't actually physically taking any bookings, that wouldn't be classed as delivering a service because it is actually training. So it's nuanced, but it is in effect, as long as you're not doing your duties that you were doing previously.
So in the scenario that you and I discussed, Sharon, we are planning to move to new offices in Brighton, and we've got some people on furlough, and I thought, what a great idea to get a paintbrush in their hand and get them down to the new office in Brighton. So they won't be doing their normal role. So apparently that's okay. Whether they'll do it or not is another thing.
Yes, as long as they do it of their own volition and they're quite happy to help out and they're observing social distancing. You could argue it could be in the workplace, but actually it's voluntary. They can choose to do it or not. It's not a normal job. It's really, what the government is trying to encourage here is that, people keep in contact, you use the opportunity for training. And I know lots of employers have done lots of mandatory training during this period.
Okay, so Jill has a question, and I think it probably is answered by my painting question. She asks, would you be able to bring in furloughed employees to deep clean the gym?
So I would suggest that on that particular question, there is guidance about deep cleaning. And that when you should review that guidance first of all and consider whether that's appropriate or not. I would not necessarily recommend it from that perspective, because the guidance is quite clear about specialist and appropriate, etc. And do your employees, would they normally do a deep clean routine? It's an area that I would worry about if you brought people in to do it, and I would direct you to the government guidance on deep cleaning.
But if the coaches don't normally do the cleaning and they're bringing them in to do the cleaning, they're not doing their normal day job.
So I think my challenge is the word deep cleaning, because how do we know what the right rules are around deep cleaning, etc., the rest of it? Now, if you want to bring, people in, we have seen this before, which is that, people just come in and just help clean up the environment, get it ready and get it moving further forward. I don't see any issue with that. My biggest concern is because there's these rules and regulations around the deep cleaning and how you do it and cleaning routines and stuff. I can't say whether the coaches are trained to do deep cleaning in the right way.
All right. So the principle of it is okay, but whether they can actually, whether they're qualified to deep clean is maybe the question.
But I think you need to be clear. I think my challenge with the deep cleaning bit is also, is that providing a service? I think there's a difference between painting an office and picking a paintbrush and putting a lick on it or lick of paint on. I think in terms of, if deep cleaning is a an activity that needs to be done in terms of opening a gym. So I think first of all, check the guidance around deep cleaning and what those requirements actually are, because Dave, I would just super worry about giving advice about deep cleaning and coaches doing it.
Okay, fine. Question from Amanda. Do you have to pay staff to complete training? Normal rate of pay?
Okay, so this is the age-old national minimum wage question. So most of your individuals, whilst they're on furlough, are being paid 80% of their salary, and that equivalent is obviously above national minimum wage. So as long as they are above national minimum wage, that's absolutely fine. Where you get a challenge is where you may have an apprentice. So if you've got an apprentice who you are asking to do training, they should be paid at their normal national minimum wage rate for their apprenticeship level.
Okay, good. Okay, so from Shirley, we have checked many insurers and most will not cover for pandemics. Business interruption will not cover either. I read something on this about insurers that even if you did have a pandemic cover, that they're doing their best to wiggle out of pay now.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting one, because I've heard of a few individuals who have been successful, but I think that's where the insurer didn't perhaps write their terms in perhaps favourable to the insurer. I can't comment on these things, but I suppose you can take from my tone that I don't think it's helpful. I don't think necessarily some of it is in the spirit, because I do know of people who have pandemic cover and they still haven't been able to claim on it.
Okay, good. Question from the City of Lancaster, Gymnastics Club. Could you have a coach delivering a Zoom session to a squad at the gym before July 4th, providing the self-certification certificate was in place?
So first of all, yes, as long as they're not furloughed, because that would be considered being provided a service. Can they deliver it? So would they be at the gym but delivering it to people outside of the gym?
Yeah.
So this is a really great question, because if the gym is their workplace, okay, so even though they are not delivering the service or the physical hands-on in that workplace, the fact is that is their workplace. And my understanding is that they would have to have fulfilled those requirements by that, even if it is just one person going in. The fact is that you have to ensure that you have completed those activities. So if you had, and I know it sounds really stupid, but if you had the coach in their home delivering that Zoom session, that would be fine. But because they're physically going into the gym, and the gym is deemed to be the workplace, that's where the difference comes in.
Okay, good. Question, I think there's still just a question over the cleaning one. If it was just general cleaning, can those furloughed workers come in?
Would they normally have done the general cleaning?
I think the answer is no.
Going in and just getting the environment prepared, let's describe it that way round, just going in and being super helpful and getting the environment prepared, that's about kind of starting to return to work. And I think one of the things that actually we are waiting for, and again, as I've said earlier on, is what is this guidance going to be about part-time furlough? Because that actually would be the great time to start to think about it, because having that flexibility is going to be hugely helpful. So I don't think, one of the things I want to be super clear on is I don't want people to go away from this and go, right, I'm going to get all the coaches in to clean the places out. It's about actually thinking about your normal scenario. What would normally have been done in terms of providing a service? Is that a service that somebody else would have been done? Is it different in terms of just people of their own volition coming in and being super helpful on a voluntary basis?
Okay, good. Okay, I think there was just a comment in there from Amanda. Even if the club is closed, you need to certificate up. If somebody's working in there, right, you've got to have a certificate. Yes. But if nobody's working in there, then
if nobody's working in there, you don't have to have it. So if you have got somebody in there, so where you may have, and let's just think of an example, where you may have an office. People can return to work in those office environments right now, and you do need to have that certificate up and in place. Okay, but let's describe it as the front end, the customer end of it may not be open as yet. But where you do have those people who may be working in the back office, you do need to do that.
Okay, good. There was a question. It's not really HR or staffing, but is there a deep cleaning trainable course out there? As a small club, cost for such a deep cleaning could blow us out of the market.
Yeah. So there are. So this is a great question, and if you can give me 24 hours, because I am in the process of talking with 2 online training companies about a similar type of issue. So I've got a couple of calls tomorrow with them, because there is guidance out there. There's a couple of online training courses out there about COVID-19 and cleaning routines as own hygiene and office cleaning routines. And I'm actually just looking at sourcing them for a couple of clients. So give me 24 hours. I'll come back to you on that one, Dave.
Okay, good. I bet you didn't think you was going to have that discussion 2 months ago.
Do you know? Yeah. Well, the discussions I've had, I didn't think I was going to have yet at all.
Okay. We have a question from Katrina. Do schools have to have the certificate up?
Yes. So let me just go through my little pile of, just bear with me a second on my pile of notes, and where I see if I can find the schools one. Because the schools is a working environment, offices, construction and outdoor, plants and warehouses, restaurants, vehicles, other people's homes, shops. So this is a great question, and I have to say I haven't seen any schools guidance. So again, let me go and find out, and I'll come back to you on that one.
Okay, good question from Katrina. Question from Jen. Would we be able to have classes outside on a school field or in the park?
Yeah, and do you know what? I was just talking to, so I had a call earlier on with a colleague in the US, and they've just started doing outdoor worship and outdoor classes, so this is North Carolina, outdoor worship. And he was talking about one of his children in gymnastics classes outdoor. He hasn't done anything as yet, but that's what their thinking was. So you can potentially see that this could be a way forward, but obviously right now you are only allowed to meet one person at a time from outside your own household. So that's the reason why tennis can go ahead, and as long as you're maintaining social distancing. Personally, longer term, it's very sensible for the government to be thinking about that, but obviously right now you can't do that because it's more than one person.
Okay, and I think it does seem to be a fairly obvious option.
It's an obvious solution, isn't it? It is.
But I think that probably feeds back into your insurance.
Because at this time of year, there's often quite a lot of these outdoor boot camps going on, isn't there? And stuff like that in the parks. And I was thinking the other day, are they going to restart them? But I think because the government's been very clear with the guidance in the UK about being one person, but could you go and deliver, a one-on-one tuition?
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to say you can, all right, but is it breaking social distancing? I don't know.
That's a question that Kim's asking.
Yeah. I mean, I does it, doesn't it? It's the bizarreness of it in terms of the fact that what the government is saying is use your common sense. So, if I wanted to meet, and not that I have a personal trainer, but if I'd ever had one, if I wanted to go and meet my personal trainer, well, technically that's a one-on-one relationship, and that technically is fine in the scenario that they're advising.
Yeah. Okay. Question here. We have classes at a university sports centre, so would they need to display the self-certification certificate?
The sports centre.
Yeah. So they're
Yeah.
at a university sports centre. Is it the university themselves that will have to display that certificate? Would the club have to do it, or would there be a need for two certificates, one for the club and one for the university?
So you need to have a conversation with them, because effectively you're going into a building where you are then running your club. And so you need to have a conversation with them about the rules and routines that they are actually putting into place, and then think about how does that work for you and your requirements. So it is going to have to be quite a lot of collaboration around that.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like, for example, where you have got a business that is a tenant in a shared office space. You're going to have to engage with that, because there will be communal areas where you don't necessarily have control over the entrance and the exit. You may not have control over the lift procedures. You may not have control over the door entry. You're absolutely going to have to collaborate. And I think that's the reason why I'm encouraging people to plan now. Well, we don't have the full leisure guidance as yet. Start those conversations now, because people really need to think about them, because when the government does flick the switch, what we've heard is it'd be about 48 hours notice, and you want to be ready, and you want to be in the front foot for that.
Okay, good. I think it's very clear from the chat that BG are saying no, we are an indoor sport, no outdoor activity. Good. Any questions from anyone else? This is your time to ask.
I can only know what's going on from the cycling point of view, and we're obviously, from a cycling point of view, we're being really encouraged right now. Very encouraged about what's actually happening. But I do feel for those indoor sports. It's just, and getting some clarity, and it would be really, really helpful.
Good. Let's see if there's any more questions going to come in. If not, we'll.
Okay,
we'll
so I owe you stuff in terms of on the certificate, on the deep cleaning stuff, and also on the deep cleaning courses as well. Those are the key things I owe you, yeah?
Yeah, if you can follow up on that, that would be great. We'll post those into the community page.
Yes.
Sorry, just one question has come in. City of Lancaster said this has been helpful, thank you. From Edward, are we able to return to the workplace to undertake general cleaning, i.e. that is a reasonable excuse to be out? So nothing to do with furloughing. Can we get back in the club and give it a good clean?
Again, follow your guidance that you are required to do, and if it's you on your own and you're the owner of that space in that area, then obviously you need to do the right things in terms of the maintenance of those facilities in that environment.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Makes sense. All right. If there's no other questions, I hope that's been helpful, guys. Kim, anything from you, or just you're getting ready for next week? Let me see if I can unmute you. No, she's muted.
All right, breaking news, Northern Ireland. There you go. Apparently in Northern Ireland, they're going to start to ease the lockdown next week. I'm just trying to quickly read that, what I've just come in. There's a 5-phase blueprint for lifting the restrictions in Northern Ireland. So if you've got any clubs that way, I'll have a quick look at this as well. All right, that's just been announced.
Okay, fine. Good. All right. Kim, I can't unmute you, I'm afraid, because Sharon is the host. So
shall I unmute you, Kim?
Yeah, you have the power. There you go.
Oh, I so want to mute him, Kim.
Thank you, Sharon. No, I just wanted to remind everybody to either pop in the chat box here and give me your specific requests concerning online content that you would like addressed next week, or preschool content that you would like addressed the week after, or also put that in the Facebook group, or you can also email that to me. But this is what I spend my time doing, researching these issues and getting answers. So please let me know if you have anything that you would like addressed on digital content or managing preschool rephasing.
Good, thanks, Kim. And for everybody else, if you found that useful, let us know in the Facebook community group. If you're finding these webinar series helpful, please do share it with your fellow club owners and managers. If you have any feedback for us, we'd love to hear it. Okay, Good. All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time. Thank you very much, Sharon. And
you.
we'll follow up in the group.
All right. Fabulous.
All right.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thanks, then.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
So the island stuff seems.
Sharon, you would
Yeah.
just need to end the meeting because you're the host.
Yeah. Okay. I will do.
Thanks.